Well, hey there, listeners. Welcome back to the Brand Marketing Show. Kath Langman, your host here. And today's episode is actually a topic that I've been sitting on for a couple of months, kind of mulling over an experience that I had, which I'll share in a minute. But also, it's just a topic that I wanted to wait until the timing felt right to share with you. And so when this episode comes out, it will be early-ish still in April, but smack bang in the middle of school holidays for most of Australia and New Zealand, I think as well. It'll be sandwiched between the Easter long weekend and the Anzac Day long weekend in what is quite frequently a quieter patch for e-commerce sales. And I know from talking to people like you, brand founders, every week that a lot of you are sitting on your hands watching your numbers, feeling increasingly anxious about consumer confidence and the economic climate, and just wondering whether you should be doing something different across the board. But specifically, a lot of you are wondering whether you need to be discounting more and whether the rise of Temu and Shein means that premium brands just really need to get more price competitive in order to survive. I mean, it doesn't help when Australia Post releases their annual report and talks about discount-driven sales and the promiscuity of customers and some really lovely comments. But let me tell you a story before we get into it. And then I want to show you what the data is actually saying. Because the conclusion a lot of brand founders are drawing from the market right now is not only wrong, it's the opposite of what the evidence supports. So let us get into it. Back in February, I think I shared this on the show actually. I was at the Reed Gift Fair in Sydney, helping to represent our client Baby Aiders. And Reed, I would say, is one of Australia's major trade fairs. It's a gift and lifestyle product fair. It's a wholesale one, if you don't know about it. It's where retailers come to discover and order products from the brands that they stock. A lot of them are premium brands, not all of them. But for many of the brands that were being represented there, they are carefully curated, founder-led, quality-focused brands. And so not exactly the natural habitat for the fast, cheap, disposable kind of products. I mean, to be perfectly honest, I don't think fast, cheap, disposable kind of products can probably afford to actually exhibit at a show like that. But anyway, at some point during the fair, something really curious happened and word kind of started spreading amongst the exhibitors. I mean, if you've ever been at a trade show like that before, there's moments where you're really busy and then many, many, many more moments where there's just not lots of people coming through. So the exhibitors talk to each other. It's the only way you can pass the 10-hour days. But word was spreading amongst the exhibitors that a representative from Temu was doing the rounds of the stalls. An Australian representative, I mean, probably don't need to tell anyone who Temu is, but obviously it's not an Australian platform or business. But anyway, so this rep was not there to buy product. He was there to pitch to the brand owners. And the pitch was essentially this. Temu is working on repositioning. They are aware that they've built a reputation as the go-to destination for cheap, low quality, disposable everything, and they want to move away from that. They're specifically trying to attract more high quality premium brands to list on their platform, kind of in an attempt to shift consumer perception towards something a bit more like Amazon. Curious, right? So this is not a rumor. This was a direct approach. I had this conversation with this rep. It was in a public trade setting to multiple exhibitors. And let's just say that the response from the exhibitors that this guy was talking to was pretty underwhelming because nobody seemed keen. But hold that thought because here's what struck me as I had this conversation and was watching this unfold. These brand founders, the ones being approached by Temu, instinctively and immediately knew that listing on Temu would be bad for their brands. They didn't need to run the numbers or consult a strategist. They just felt it in their gut. Associating their product with that platform would probably undermine everything that they had built, their positioning, their pricing, their customer perception, all of it would be compromised. And in my personal opinion, that gut reaction is absolutely the correct strategy. And yet, many of these same brand founders, and I'm definitely talking generally here, not about anyone specific from that day, have spent the last 12 to 18 months watching Temu grow, watching Shein continue to grow, watching basket sizes shrink across the e-commerce retail industry, and just kind of quietly asking themselves, should I be running more offers? Should I be lowering my prices to compete? And I mean, the contradiction is pretty stark, right? In one breath, I would never put my brand on Temu because it would destroy my positioning. And then in the next breath, maybe I should discount my products so that I can compete with these platforms. But you can't hold both of those positions at the same time. If you understand that your brand cannot afford to be associated with cheap, then you understand that your brand cannot afford to compete on price, full stop. But here's the part of this story that I find most interesting. Temu has built a genuinely massive business. I mean, I don't know their figures, but you observe it, right? And they have hundreds of millions of users globally. They have been growing in Australia, gaining close to 1 million new Australian customers over a 12-month period. And despite all of that growth, or maybe because of it, they are now standing at a premium gift fair with their hat in their hand, asking quality brands to help them escape their own reputation. The race to the bottom clearly has a flaw, and Temu just hit it. Cheap is not a brand position, it's a ceiling. And you just can't build loyalty on price. You can't build meaningful repeat purchase behavior on price. You can't build the kind of brand equity that makes customers choose you when there is a cheaper alternative, something somewhere. And in Temu's case, they have built an enormous customer base of people who are there purely for the price. And now they can't evolve the brand without, those same customers revolting. And I don't think that's a business problem I want any of my clients to have. Certainly, I don't want to have it myself. I mentioned earlier the Australia Post e-commerce report of 2026. They release it every year, probably right now. It's come out at a time when nobody really has the most favourable point of view of Australia Post. Thanks for hiking prices up yet again. Anyway, it's always quite insightful, and it has landed recently and has, some pretty useful data for all e-commerce brand founders. But one headline was Australians spent $82.6 billion online in 2025, and that is up 14% year on year during a cost of living crunch in a period of genuine economic pressure for a lot of households. I mean, that's huge, right? Like, let's sit with that for just a minute. $82.6 billion, 14% year on year growth during a cost of living squeeze. So when you think of that, it's pretty clear that the money is not entirely gone. I mean, it's absolutely demonstrably being spent. And the question is not whether there are customers out there willing to spend money online. They very clearly are. The question is, which brands are they spending it with and why? And I think this, gets really interesting. Two data points that seem contradictory until you understand what's really happening. One, the average basket size has dropped a bit. It's down to around $96, a slight decline year on year. But the second interesting fact is that purchase frequency is up. Australians are making 4 more online purchases per year than they were the year before. So smaller baskets, but more transactions simultaneously. So what this tells you is that more shopping is happening, but a meaningful chunk of it is being discount driven and sale event driven. The Australia Post report confirms this. So 73% of consumers say they wait for sales events before purchasing. 81% say they actively shop around for the best deal. And in fact, I'm pretty sure the report actually uses the word promiscuous buyers, but these are the behaviours of the price motivated buyers, and they are real and they are a significant part of the market. Nobody can argue that. But here is the critical thing to understand if you are a premium brand. Those are not your customers, the ones who are just going to hop from brand to brand based on whoever has the cheapest price. If you are a premium, founder-led, quality-focused, innovative, artisan, sustainable brand, any of those descriptors, the shopper who waits just for the big end of financial year sales or Black Friday and just compares prices across 16 different retailers before choosing who to buy with, that person is not your core customer. Reality is they've never been your core customer. Your customer buys based on things like identity, values, quality, and trust. And your consumer does their research before purchasing, but that research is about validation and it's not about finding the cheapest option. Your customer, when they find a brand they love, comes back, not because you ran a sale, but because the brand means something to them. Market data showing smaller baskets and more price shopping is not necessarily evidence that your customers have changed. It is evidence that there is a large and growing segment of price motivated buyers who are very visible in the aggregate numbers, but aggregate numbers are not your marketing strategy. So I want to spend a little bit of time on something that came up in the comments and DMs after last week's episode, the one about, why premium buyers don't buy from ads alone. And that episode actually went a little bit wild on social media this week, which is brilliant. And the conversation is quite genuinely fascinating, specifically around Kmart dupes. Some of the comments that I read suggested that when a Kmart dupe, or any dupe, doesn't have to just be Kmart, I guess, of a premium product hits the shelves, the original brand loses its appeal. And, the flood of cheap versions just ends up saturating the market and removes the exclusivity and demand at the higher price point. But I really want to unpack this properly because the full picture is actually way more interesting than a simple yes or no. Take the brand Louis Vuitton as our case study because and I remember studying this way back in the day when I was at uni, that they've had a counterfeit market for their bags for 50 years. Fake Louis Vuitton bags have been sold on street corners on every continent for decades, and yet Louis Vuitton remains one of the most commercially powerful luxury brands in the world. So either counterfeits don't hurt them, or counterfeits are in some genuinely measurable ways helping them. And I think it's the latter, and here is why. The first effect is brand visibility. I mean, the sheer ubiquity of the Louis Vuitton monogram on genuine bags, on fakes, in pop culture, in music, everywhere, has made it the most recognized luxury symbol in the world. Every fake bag is, in a very real sense, a walking advertisement. It keeps the brand at the forefront of popular culture and it ensures that the aspiration never fades, even among people who will never buy the real thing. That constant cultural presence has compounding value that Louis Vuitton has never had to pay for. The second effect is the quality contrast. And here's what actually happens when someone holds a fake Louis Vuitton bag and then encounters the real thing. The stitching, the weight of the hardware, the feel of the leather versus whatever synthetic material the fake one uses. The differences are visceral. Seeing or handling a low quality dupe does not diminish the original, it actually dramatizes the gap. It makes the craftsmanship of the authentic piece so much more tangible and more valued than it would have been had the dupe never existed. The fake, counterintuitively, becomes proof of why the real thing is worth it. And then the third effect is status validation. When a brand is heavily counterfeited, it sends a signal. This is something the world wants. Counterfeiting at its core is kind of a form of flattery at scale. It tells the market that the item is so desirable, so aspirational, that the entire shadow industry has grown up, around imitating it. So for the premium buyer, owning the genuine article in that context carries a specific kind of satisfaction, the knowledge that they have the real thing in a world full of people carrying something that only pretends to be. And then the fourth effect is what I'd call the discernment response. As fakes have become more sophisticated, the so-called super fakes that are increasingly difficult to distinguish from the real thing, something interesting has happened among loyal luxury customers. They have become more deliberate about buying directly from official boutiques, more invested in the provenance and authentication of what they own. The risk of being deceived has made the act of buying authentically feel much more intentional and much more special. The purchase experience itself becomes part of the value. And then the fifth effect, I think, is perhaps the most human one. For many premium buyers, there is a genuine emotional dimension to owning the real thing that a fake simply can't replicate. The pride of it, the personal accomplishment, the knowledge that this particular object is exactly what it claims to be, made by the people who claim to have made it, with the materials and the care that they claim went into it. A fake might look similar on the outside, but it does not feel the same to own it. And premium buyers know the difference, which is precisely why they pay the difference. Now, apply all of this to your brand and the Kmart dupe conversation. The TikTok commenters who said the dupe makes the original less appealing are describing a real experience, but it is the experience of a buyer for whom the product's value was primarily about exclusivity and status signaling. And when the Kmart version appears, the signal is diluted, and yes, the appeal diminishes for that specific buyer. But that's not the premium buyer. The premium buyer who loves your brand because of its quality, its values, its story, its craftsmanship, that buyer sees the Kmart dupe and thinks, well, clearly everyone wants this, and then they feel rather good about being the person who has the real one. If the dupe conversation is making you a little bit anxious about your brand's resilience, I really want to invite you to sit with that anxiety just for a moment and ask yourself honestly, who is my actual customer base? If a meaningful proportion of your customers are there because your product felt special and just out of reach for most people, rather than because they genuinely connect with what your brand stands for and values, then yes, a dupe will unsettle them. That's not a dupe problem, though. That's a brand positioning problem. And the solution is not to panic or to discount. The solution is to do the deeper work of building real brand connection, the kind that makes your brand irreplaceable to your customer, regardless of what Kmart puts on its shelves. So let's talk about right now. We're in April, it's school holidays, the lull between Easter and Anzac Day long weekends. Lots of people are away. Every year, a lot of brands treat this period as a time to go quiet. They pull back on content, they pull back on ad spend, they tell themselves it's just not worth pushing marketing when people are distracted and, there's a whole lot of other stuff going on. And every year, the brands that maintain their presence during the quiet periods are the ones with a warm, engaged audience when the next peak period arrives. And here's the thing about discovery. It does not happen at checkout. It happens in the weeks and months before a purchase. When someone buys from you in May, it'll be because they discovered you in March or April. And if you go super quiet in April as a reaction to how quiet things might be in the marketplace right now, you're not in the consideration set for those May purchases in the same way. And it really just boils down to something that simple. So what should you be doing right now from a marketing perspective? And first, content that speaks to your brand's values, story, and point of view, not necessarily promotional content, not, big sale announcements, I probably wouldn't be going out and launching a huge, big, new, important product right now. But, the kind of content that makes your ideal customer feel really seen and understood and, that really resonates with them in this moment. And the kind that builds brand connection that makes price a lot less relevant when the purchase time does come. This is backed up by the Australia Post report data. 60% of Australian shoppers use social media for product discovery, and 1 in 2 have purchased something after seeing it on social media. I would just say, duh. I mean, we all do that now, right? But discovery is happening through content, through story, through community, and not through these big, deep discount sale banners. Secondly, if you have been sitting on a customer survey or have been meaning to gather some proper customer intelligence, this is a brilliant time to do it. Your existing customers are slightly more available, the noise level is lower, and the insights that you gather now will help shape your content and campaigns for the second half of the year. Thirdly, have a think about your organic search and the discovery infrastructure. The Australia Post report explicitly calls out that AI-driven shopping and discovery is accelerating rapidly. They're projecting that by 2030, which frighteningly enough is not very far off now, agentic AI will influence 30% of digital commerce transactions. That's not as far away as it sounds, and the brands that will be visible to AI-driven discovery are the ones with the really rich, authoritative, well-structured content that clearly communicates what they sell, who it's for, and why it's worth it. And by extension, content that humans are going to want to actually engage with, right? Otherwise, it's not going to actually do the job of influencing a human. April, in other words, is a compounding investment period. The work you do now does not show up in your April numbers. It shows up in your July numbers, in your October numbers, and in your Christmas numbers. That is how brand building works. And it is why the brands that go quiet in a quiet month, like April might be for you, are perpetually behind. So let me bring this back to where we started. Temu showed up at a premium gift fair trying to become something it has never been, a trusted home for quality brands. Nobody said yes. And the reason nobody said yes is the same reason that your brand should not be trying to compete with the Temus of the world on price. You just can't build a high quality brand by racing toward the bottom, trying to compete in that way. That position as a race to the bottom platform, Temu even is trying to escape it. The market does not need another cheap option. It has plenty of those as it is. What it needs and what the $82.6 billion in online spending demonstrates there is an appetite for is brands with genuine quality, clear values, and the marketing intelligence to connect with those buyers who care about those things. Of course, it's not going to be every buyer. It never has been. But it is a real significant and growing segment of the market, and it is the segment your brand was built for. So try not to fall into the trap of trying to compete with the Temos of the world and start just become more irreplaceably yourself. Now, if you found this episode useful or inspiring in some way, or just a little bit of a light bulb moment, I would genuinely love it if you would share it with the brand founder friend who you know really needs to hear it, particularly anyone who has been wrestling with the pricing or discounting question lately. And if you are ready to get some proper strategy behind your marketing rather than just reactive tactics, book in a chat with me and my team. You can do that by heading to productpreneurmarketing.com to find out how we work. That is it for this week's episode, though, and I look forward to being back in your ears on the show again next week. Bye for now.